Close your eyes and imagine a sound, sharp, metallic, cutting through the fog like a blade, not a gunshot, not an explosion, a whistle. A single shrill note that meant, for hundreds of thousands of men crouched in mud-soaked trenches, that the waiting was over. That note, blown through a nickel-plated brass whistle barely the size of a man's palm, was the last sound of stillness many soldiers would ever know. This is the story of that whistle, and the extraordinary fieldcraft, grit, and ingenuity of the men who carried it into the most brutal killing fields the modern world had ever seen. Iron earth, life beneath the surface. The Western Front was not merely a battlefield, it was an underground civilization carved by exhausted hands into the clay and chalk of France and Belgium. The smell alone was something veterans could never fully describe. Wet earth, cordite, rotting wood, and always the sour metallic tang of blood baked into the ground. Surviving here demanded fieldcraft of the highest order. Soldiers scraped funk holes into trench walls, reinforcing them with salvaged timber and corrugated iron. Experienced men positioned them above the waterline because when the rains came, and they always came, a poorly dug shelter became a drowning trap. Raised duckboards kept feet off flooded ground, slowing the devastating onset of trench foot that rotted flesh from bone and claimed more men than many battles. Water and mud, the two masters of the trench. Nothing governed trench life more ruthlessly than water. Fresh water arrived in petrol tins, giving every cup of tea a faintly oily chemical taste veterans called the flavour of the war. When supply lines were cut, men collected rainwater in ground sheets, filtered it through sand and cloth, and boiled it over braziers built from perforated biscuit tins packed with oil-soaked earth, a primitive stove producing minimal smoke and keeping sentries safe from snipers. Food was equally tactical. Soldiers with bushcraft instinct supplemented iron rations by foraging in ruined farmland, wild garlic from hedgerows, mushrooms from shelled woodlands, rabbits caught in snares fashioned from field telephone wire. This was not romanticism. It was calculated survival. The invisible soldier, camouflage, and concealment. No man's land was honestly one of the most dangerous places in human history, yet, well, men crossed it nightly on raids and reconnaissance missions. Soldiers would black their faces with burnt cork, remove anything that rattled, and move in short rushes between shell craters. They learned to freeze the instant a star shell burst overhead, because movement, not shape, was what the eye caught in darkness. Experienced men draped themselves in Hessian sacking threaded with local vegetation, creating these rudimentary ghillie suits decades before the term even existed. This was never taught in any manual. It was passed from veteran to newcomer like whispered gospel. Morale and mind, the fieldcraft of staying human. Survival was never purely physical. Officers managed morale as deliberately as ammunition, knowing it was equally finite. Small rituals of normalcy became psychological anchors. The daily shave in cold water, letters written by candlelight, music played on mouth organs in dugouts. Modern wilderness psychology teaches exactly this. Routine creates stability under stress. The morning shave performed under shell fire was not vanity. It was mental fieldcraft, a daily act of defiance against the machinery of dehumanization. The whistle's final note. On November 11, 1918, whistles blew again across the Western Front, but the men who heard them did not fix bayonets. They stood up, looked at one another, and wept or laughed or simply sat in silence. The same instrument that had launched assaults into wire and machine gun fire now carried one final message. It was over. The soldiers of the First World War were not trained survivalists. They were postmen, farmers, and factory workers who built shelters from rubble, filtered water from craters, practiced concealment with improvised materials, and sustained their minds through ritual and dark humour. Every one of those skills lives on in the bushcraft and preparedness communities today. The whistle's note has faded. The lessons have not. If this episode moved you or taught you something new, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with someone who values history, self-reliance, and the timeless art of survival. Every share keeps stories like this alive, and in a world that forgets too easily, that matters more than ever.